All right, I'm going to do a pretty basic tie. I'm going to show you how I tie my olive hares here. Even though it is basic, it's kind of funny because I can't even begin to think the percentage of flies that I fish, of what percentage would be this fly. If I had to choose one fly to literally just fish, to honestly to survive off of, it would be this one. I fish an olive hare's here almost all the time. Whether it's as my main fly, as a dropper, I almost always in some aspect am fishing this somehow. It's easily my favorite fly. The way I tie it is really basic. You can really knock a lot of these out in no time, and it's very easy. So I've got a size 14 curved nymph hook with a gold tungsten bead and .015 lead-free wire. The size 14 hook is really just for video purposes. I really only use these in size 16 at the largest. I just think size 14 is a little big for a mayfly nymph imitation. So most of the time these are 16s and 18s, and I even go down to 20s. But just for this purpose, I've got a 14 in there because I figured to be able to see it easier. So I've got a few strands, about 6 strands of pheasant tail. And what I do is right past where the body's going to end, I tie that in with 3 wraps. I do 3 wraps specifically. And what I do is I just grab a hold of both ends and I just slide that tail right into position to get the length that I want, which is right about there. And I'm going to grip the tips as I tighten my tension, and I'm going to come straight down, keeping everything nice and straight and even. I'll go one more, right on to where the bend starts. Okay, now if I could find it, I use small gold wire. I don't really tie my hare's ears with, the tinsel ribbing or anything like that. I don't really do any of that. I just use regular small gold wire. So is it ribbed with gold? Yeah, technically. But when it's done, you're not really going to see that. I think that kind of allows the fly to double as a caddis larva too. So this fly really produces in a number of situations. And I'll just get that weight locked in. I like to build a little thread dam directly in front of the weight too, so that you have a little bit of a transition up there. And I'm just going to work my way down a little bit. I just want to help this taper out a little bit. And I'm using UTC 70 in olive. And what I like to do is after you make some wraps, you can see that the thread is going to start to kind of bind up a little bit. The benefit of using UTC is that it lays flat. So the more you use it and the more it binds up, you just want to give it a little twist, get that undone, and the thread will go back to laying flat again. Now for dubbing, I just have an olive hare's ear mask, and what I do is I rip out a combination of guard hairs and the underfur. It's going to end up looking something like that. What I do is right next to my desk, I always keep a coffee grinder, which I would highly recommend. You can just go anywhere and just get a cheap one for $9-10. Definitely worth it to stick a tuft of dubbing in there. Just give it a spin for about 10 seconds. It'll combine everything if you want to if you want to do your own dubbing mix, or if you want to take something like from a hare's ear mask and get everything to where you can get it onto your thread a little bit easier. I definitely recommend the coffee grinder. And as always, really thin noodle. I'm just taking tiny little tufts and getting that onto the thread. I don't want big, thick dubbing noodles. I've seen many times on these heavily dubbed nymphs or nymphs that are primarily dubbing, a lot of times you get into a couple of fish with a fly, they can rip all that dubbing right off, right down to the bare hook. I've seen that many times. You want thread built into your body so that it adds to durability. Fly will last much longer. I've had individual flies that I've caught who knows how many fish on, and have been able to put them right back in my box, use them again. And we're going to start out nice and thin at the back, and we're just going to go up. The underbody that we created is going to do most of the work for the tapered body, but obviously you can adjust it as you go, and that's what we should end up having. The gold wire, we're going to counter wrap that. So we're going to wrap that going in the other direction, and we're going to work our way up. making sure that each wrap is evenly spaced. And again, once this gets wet, you know, most of this wire is going to be covered up by the dubbing as it slicks back. Like I said in the beginning, I don't really have that real prominent gold ribbing on these nymphs. After that's tied in, we'll get that right off. For the wing case, just like the tail, I'm going to use pheasant. I'm going to rip off probably eight fibers or so. I also like big, thick, prominent wing cases, so I'm going to flip that over so the dull side is facing me. And I'm going to get all those fibers mashed right down. And I'm going to pull it out so that it clears the bead very slowly so I don't lose my initial wrap, which I almost did. Actually, I did, but I can recover that. Doesn't matter if your thorax is a little messy. We're going to dub the crap out of it, so it'll hide all that. So as I go back and secure this, I like to make sure that I extend back a little bit on top of my body so that there is a little bit of a transition there. Okay, and then for the dubbing in the thorax, same exact thing. Like I said, if this is a fly that you can knock out a lot of in a very short period of time, especially if you prep your materials. You know, if you get all your wire for your ribbing cut, get your dubbing laid out, get the beads on the hooks, all that stuff. If you really do your prep work, you can knock out a ton of these in a small amount of time, which is good because, like I said, I use these so much. I lose so many of them. So I like to make sure that I have multiple rows in my fly box full of nothing but olive hare's ear nymphs. That should be good. So I'll go 2 wraps there just to build up a little bit of bulk at the initial start of the thorax. That looks about good. I got one errant fiber here. I'm actually going to, I was going to snip it off, but we'll pull that over. It doesn't have to be perfect right away. Just get a nice loose wrap in there, and then you can move it around and make sure it looks the way you want it to look. We'll tighten it down. Get a few wraps in front. And as always, I like to use a razor blade when you get to the bead. If you snip this off with scissors, you could get some excess that might be tough to cover up. I like nice clean finishes, so I'm going to take my razor blade, I'm going to tuck it right in there and just snip that off clean. Have to refocus a little. Okay. Now, you can whip finish now, but what I like to do is I'm going to take a little bit of dubbing, enough dubbing for, I got a little piece of flash stuck in that. I don't want that. You want enough dubbing that will constitute about, I don't know, 2, maybe 3 wraps. So not a whole lot, actually just a really, really tiny little bit. I don't know if you can see that there. There's not much on there. And the reason why I do that is I like to cover up the thread wraps on top here. So with the dubbing on there, I'm just going to go ahead and whip finish this with a couple of turns right at the eye. And then the last few whip finish turns will get tucked down right inside where you'll never see them. Snip off your thread, and that's it. That's my basic olive hare's ear nymph. Like I said, I fish this pattern probably more than any other fly, and if you use the dubbing right off of the mask, you already have all of these natural guard hairs that stick out and give it that really buggy look. You can tease it out if you want, but honestly with this there's not really a reason to. So that's a really, really fast basic tie, but again, it's a fly that I probably use more so than anything.